Thanks, honey. Hey, Dave. Hey there.
Hello.
How you doing?
Very well. How are you?
I'm doing well. So Joe's getting us started. I guess, Dave, you're going to record as well. Can't hear you.
Hello, everyone.
Hi,
Hi.
Richard. Dave, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I think you're muted, Dave.
I've been on mute. Sorry.
You were talking away. Hi.
Yeah, I just said that it looks like Joe's already recording it, so I think we're all set, Joe, unless you have any different instruction.
He had said he thought you were recording as well in case it didn't work. So,
I'll do that. I think I have to do it on my other machine here.
okay. So Richard, I think we'll just do a brief update on the planning for the June meeting, and I know Dave wants to lead a little discussion and see what input the other members might have.
Okay. Sorry, that's me.
Maybe not. So Michael, is that you? I haven't seen
Yeah, it is me.
yourself in person here. Welcome. Here you are. Okay.
Okay. Again, I don't know, Joe, if you can hear me or not, but I don't think I can record the meeting at the same time that you're recording it. So we'll just assume, hopefully, that your recording is going to work.
Yeah, he's off at his other meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope it works. And,
okay. Go from there.
Okay. So we'll wait a few more minutes, I think, because we're hoping for a little more turnout here.
Yes, we have. We've heard from a number of people that they can't come. 3, I believe. And Dave, am I right? The only thing we have really that we need a quorum for would be adopting the minutes.
That's right. No big decisions tonight. So just the minutes.
Fair warning, everybody. This is Carl. I've got to log out at 7:20 to get back to work.
All right. Thank you, Carl, for letting us know. That doesn't, we don't have a quorum at this point in time. So we'll just wait a few more minutes and then go ahead.
The problem with the first really wonderful Wednesday we've had in a while.
Beautiful weather.
Also, the fact that we moved our meeting, I think we typically lose a few people when we do that. So
Yeah.
Difficult.
Yeah.
Well, I know Karen, Dave Burke's going to be late, and Holly and Karen are not coming.
Okay.
So you want to go ahead and wait another couple minutes or a minute?
Let me just look and see. I want to make sure that people aren't trying to get in. Doesn't look like it.
I noticed there wasn't a link on the email Joe sent out to the meeting like
Nope.
there usually is. So I
Oh.
got in, I clicked on an old one.
Well, let me quickly send out the link
Yeah.
that just in case anybody's trying to figure out how to get on.
It was at the bottom of the agenda.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I just missed it then.
Well, there's just anyway, the login and then the phone number for people that were maybe wanting to call.
Okay.
But it wasn't highlighted the way it usually is.
Okay. I probably just didn't look at it close enough.
Oh, I'm sure you did. Hi, Serge.
I'll try again. Hello.
Hello.
Let's see. Okay. Well, we can probably go ahead and get started. Ruth.
Okay, well, we'll call the meeting to order. I don't know if you want to introduce our guests as they speak, Dave? Is that how you want to do it, or do we need to do it?
Why don't I go ahead and, yeah, thanks, Ruth. I'll just go ahead and introduce my colleagues right now. So first we have Susan Shanks, who's a senior land use planner with the city of Tigard, and she's managing, hi Susan, the Washington Square Regional Center plan update. So you're going to hear a lot more detail and some interesting transportation ideas on that project. And then we also have Hendrik Brokelshen, hope I got it right, Hendrik, who is our new Safe Routes to School program coordinator who took over from Tina over the winter. So Hendrik's going to give you an update on the Safe Routes to School program as well as the Streets for People program for this year.
Great. All right. Well, I think why don't we go ahead and consider our minutes later in the program, just to see if we get a quorum. And so do any of the TTAC members that are present have items that they wish to bring up during our meeting today? Just as a heads up.
This is Serge. I do.
Okay. You do? Okay,
And this is Michael. I have one.
great.
Alan here. I've got something as well.
All right. And then I don't know, Dave, on, oh, never mind. I answered my own question. Okay, so we'll be sure to have time later in the meeting for each of you to bring up the items that you would like to share. So at this time, you want to go ahead, Dave, and have Susan start her presentation? Or do you want to wait?
Yeah, we can go ahead and get started, and I'll just pose a quick question to Susan. Would you like to drive the presentation, or would you like me to? And you're on mute.
I will be happy to.
Okay, great.
But thanks, Dave. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Well, hello, everybody. I actually haven't spoken to TTAC in quite a while. I don't know if folks were around when I came around and talked about the Tigard Triangle when we were doing more planning for that area. But anyway, hello to new faces, although I can't see your faces right now, and if there are any older faces out there. So my name's Susan Shanks, as Dave was saying, and I'm a senior planner with the city of Tigard, have been for about 7 years. And I do focus on long range planning. So what we mean by that is, you know, like a 20-year kind of time frame mostly, but there's certainly longer range planning. And I'm going to walk you through my Washington Square presentation. I think it's always helpful to look at graphics and maps and all sorts of things to help you visualize what I'm talking about. And because when I share my presentation and I make my screen as big as possible, just to let you know that then I can't see you if you raise your hand. So please, either Dave or anybody who raises their hand or just wants to speak or interrupt to ask me a question, please feel free to do so. And I'll try to remember to pause as well and invite questions. So yeah, with that, let me share my screen and I'll get started. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
I'm gonna try to make it even bigger. There you go.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, perfect. Okay, like I said, feel free to interject and I will try to pause as well. So this is the Washington Square Regional Center project briefing for you all. And as Dave was telling you, there's going to be some interesting transportation information I'm going to share. Obviously, I know you guys are the transportation folks, so I'll be sure to highlight all those things. The update that we're doing with this project is actually a land use and transportation, and I'm sure you know that those two things really go hand in hand when we're doing planning work. So just to give you some background on this project and even why we're doing it, it has been about 20 years since we did long-range planning for this area. And that's actually when the regional center, this area was first identified as a regional center by Metro and then subsequently by the 3 jurisdictions that I hope you can see on this map. It's kind of an interesting area in that it's both in Tigard, Beaverton, and unincorporated Washington County, and it's quite large. It's about 1,000 acres. And so in that 20 years since that original plan or vision was created for this area, a lot of things have changed. One of the things I tell people is that, you know, Amazon Prime wasn't around yet. Kind of the e-commerce that we have now really hadn't taken off yet. Lyft and Uber were not around yet. So even though this area actually has not changed significantly in the last 20 years, how we shop, how we travel, how we work has changed a lot. So we just really felt it was time for an update and to take another look at this area. And also, as you probably know, that we have new housing and climate challenges every day. And it's also very important that we do this long-range planning work with equity in mind. So that's why we're doing this update. And again, it's a land use and transportation update to the original vision. We think the original vision still has a lot of merit. We want this area, or the city of Tigard wants this area to be, given that it's our regional center, we want it to be really vibrant and dense and walkable and transit oriented and all of those things that make for like kind of a great civic place and urban place. And not all parts of the city, you know, need to be that way. But in terms of our town centers and our regional centers, that's what we're looking for, where we can support more growth so that other areas can be also what they are, so that we can have the river terraces and the Bull Mountains and all our parks and trails, because we have these concentrations of people and jobs. And we want our new updated vision to be consistent with Tigard's strategic plan to be walkable, healthy, and inclusive. So that's something that we're definitely keeping in mind as we go through this planning process. So any questions for me yet? Okay, I'm going to keep going.
Susan, I have just a quick question.
Sure.
It sounds like regional center is something that has a specific definition that I don't know, and maybe some of the other people would appreciate hearing exactly what is a regional center.
That's a great question. There's in the Portland metropolitan area, there are actually 8 designated regional centers. So this is just one of 8. And regional centers, when they were identified by Metro, and there was a lot of community engagement with all the cities during that time, it was decided based on many different things, both where the transportation infrastructure was located, where job centers were located, where there could be maybe more housing or was already a lot of housing. They basically took a look at what was there or what could be in the future and designated these 8 areas as regional centers. And interestingly enough, for better or worse, a number of regional centers were identified where there was an existing large retail center. So for example, Clackamas Town Center, even though the name says Town Center, it's actually a Metro designated regional center. Downtown Beaverton is a regional center. This area is a regional center. It contains Washington Square Mall, which is a huge regional draw to this area, as well as all the businesses and business parks that are on the west side of Highway 217. So this was already 20 years ago a regional destination for retail, for shopping, as well as for a lot of jobs. And then so that's kind of at the highest level of kind of designations in the region, in terms of like where we want to see it be like a really dense job and housing location. And then right below that is what we call town centers. And Tigard actually has a town center that kind of incorporates our downtown as well as the Tigard Triangle. And they're also meant to have a lot of, housing and jobs as well, but not as much as the regional centers. The regional centers will always aspired to be even denser than our town centers. So I hope that answers your question. And you can always take a look at, if you type in, like, just as you're searching the web, type in Metro Regional Centers, and it can bring up a map of the whole region with the 8 identified regional centers as well as town centers. And it's a pretty interesting map.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. That was a great question. Okay, so moving on, I just first want to highlight one of the reasons why I wanted to speak with you all tonight is that we are in the middle of an online open house where we are actively, trying to tell people about the draft recommendations that we have created because we want to hear from people. And one of the big questions we're asking people is, what are their transportation priorities? So Dave has this presentation. You're welcome to write down the website at the bottom here. It's where the online open house is taking place. Maybe some of you are going to get one of our mailers that we're going to be sending out tomorrow. But we really want to hear from a lot of people and to get their input. And so I encourage you to go and check it out and to share it with folks who might be interested. You don't have to answer all the questions in the open house. You can just focus on the things that are of interest to you. So don't feel like you have to, do it all if you don't have a lot of time. And just to give you an overview, the open house focuses on these 5 areas. So it focuses on the regional center as a whole and, an updated vision for the regional center. And then it focuses on the 3 sub areas that are in the Tigard planning area. So we call the mall areas the 1 sub area. Metzger is more the residential area, just east of Greenberg. And then the Nimbus Cascade area is just pretty much identified because of the 2 streets that serve the area, all the different business parks on the west side of Highway 217. And then lastly, although not least, we're asking people questions about pedestrian and bicycle connections in this area. One of the challenging things about the regional center, in addition to it having many road authorities, obviously Highway 217 and Hall Boulevard, those are ODOT facilities. It also has Beaverton facilities in the former Shoals Ferry Road. It has Tigard facilities. But that there's a lot of different road authorities, there's a lot of different jurisdictions. And so over time, different jurisdictions and road authorities, they don't necessarily all share the same priorities. And so we want to go back and take another look about, okay, what does Tigard really have control over and what are our priorities? Because we can't necessarily dictate what Beaverton does or what ODOT does. So we're wanting to see a little bit more happen in this area and to have better bike and ped connections. And so we're realizing that we kind of need to get in the driver's seat, so to speak, with regard to this area. So that's kind of what the open house covers, is these 5 kind of different topics. And this map hopefully gives you a sense of where those areas are, the sub areas in particular, and the area that kind of is under Tigard's kind of planning authority. So the yellow is the Metzger sub area. It contains residences as well as a lot of businesses along Greenberg Road, as well as the Lincoln Center, which has Lincoln Tower. The red area in the middle contains Washington Square Mall. Hopefully you all know where that is. And then the purple area on the west side of 217 is that business park and commercial area that we call the Nimbus Cascade sub area. So those are the focus of our open house and our draft recommendations and what I'm sharing with you tonight. So our draft proposal, well, first actually to help you understand the draft proposal, what I'm showing you here is an image, a kind of a graphic representation of the original vision from 20 years ago. And right after this, I'm going to show you a proposed vision at the same scale and with the same graphic style. And I could flip back and forth between the two of them so you can see the differences. But I want to point out a couple of really key things here that I know you as a transportation group would be particularly interested in. So one, note Highway 217 that runs through the middle of this pink area. So Highway 217 is a barrier. I mean, obviously it provides regional, through movement, but it also serves as a barrier for people wanting to get across it. Also note that the heavy rail line runs parallel to Highway 217 on the west side, and then even further to the west, Fano Creek with Fano Creek Trail, which is this green area over here, kind of also sort of runs parallel to both of those, both the railroad and the highway further to the west. While Fano Creek is lovely and that regional trail is lovely, the rail and the highway served to make it very difficult to access from folks that are over here. And so what the original vision proposed is to try to make better connections to Fano Creek. And so one of the things they proposed was what they called the Washington Square Loop Trail, which is this dashed green line. Oops, sorry, where's my cursor? This dashed green line that goes all the way around the Washington Square Regional Center area. So that was one of their, big aspirations for this area, is to get people more connected to the green space and the trail that the Fano Creek corridor represents. And then the other big transportation move that they recommended, and ultimately that Tigard adopted, although other jurisdictions didn't end up adopting, is 4 new bridges over Highway 217. So two of the bridges, being green and being associated with that loop trail, were meant to be ped bike bridges. So one in the north, I'm kind of circling now, and one in the south. And that's kind of along the Ash Creek corridor, if you're familiar with where Ash Creek is. And then the other 2 bridges were meant to be full multimodal streets with ped bike facilities, connecting the mall over to all the way across 217, across the railroad tracks, all the way to where Nimbus dead ends, because they also wanted to see Nimbus extended all the way down to Greenberg. And then the other bridge was connecting the northern part of the mall to the Beaverton side of the business park area, And what they envisioned there is for a west station, because 20 years ago that west station that's there now didn't exist. They wanted to see the west station actually located at the terminus of this bridge, and that have that area be a transit-oriented, dense node that people could easily get across, 217 and the railroad tracks, one side to the other, and make, using west very easy. So as you might know, west did not end up this far south. West ended up further to the north, just so you know, and I'll show that in the next slide. And then the last kind of big transportation thing that the original vision recommended was an upgraded transit center. So there's a transit center here now on the mall property, represented by kind of the bus on the big yellow dot. And again, with this proposed bridge, they imagined, just much better connectivity between the two kinds of transit services here, as well as, connections across these two big barriers. So they envisioned a better upgraded transit center that was connected to the West Line. So those are the big transportation ideas they had 20 years ago. As you might know, or as I was just saying, the West Line the West Station did not end up this far south. Nothing really has happened to the transit center that's located on the mall property, and none of these bridges that were envisioned have come into being. So when we started taking a look at and talking to the jurisdictions and the various road authorities and thinking about, how can we improve connectivity, especially for bikes and peds in this area, in a way that is, achievable. While we admire, kind of the vision that the planners and the community had 20 years ago, given that it has not come to fruition, we really had to take a hard look at, what is truly the feasibility, particularly the financial feasibility of putting 4 new bridges over Highway 217. And what we've concluded with our market analysis and our pedestrian bike audit and a lot of other technical analysis, feasibility, and whatnot in terms of what might happen in this area on the development side of things, is that, and then talking to the other jurisdictions like Beaverton, that bridge that would go from Tigard to Beaverton further to the north, they don't have it in any of their plans. Like it's really not on their radar at all. And so without them as a partner and without a lot of other funding, that bridge to the north is just a non-starter. And that whole loop trail, as you can see, one of the things we're not proposing is the loop trail, again, because our partners to the north, which is Beaverton, unincorporated Washington County, as well as the Tualatin Hills Park and Rec District, they don't have that loop trail in their plans. And it goes through a lot of private property, and it would take a lot of property acquisition or condemnation, and it would take a lot of time to piece together all the segments of that trail. So we just wanted to be a little bit more realistic about how we can improve this area for connectivity for peds and bikes, and really get something done. And so what you're seeing here is not 4 bridges, perhaps not even 2, even though we're showing 2, but we are asking the community if there was a, if it's feasible, like technically feasible, if we could get a multimodal bridge from Cascade, so not from Nimbus, but from Cascade Avenue over to the mall area, connecting the 2 commercial areas, is that something that the community is interested in us pursuing? If we could only do one thing, is that the thing the community would want us to do? And then conversely, we're also asking them, again, if we can only do one thing, is this bridge, which we're suggesting would be a ped bike bridge, kind of where 95th alignment happens, if you're familiar with that area, that would connect basically the Metzger neighborhood to the north to the kind of the Greenberg neighborhood to the south, with potentially definitely some real, on street, or at least or a trail through the Ash Creek area, since the city now has now owns the area around Ash Creek that we're going to be turning into a park in the next couple of years. That there's definitely good possibility for a ped bike bridge here to lead into good access on streets or on trails over to the Fano Creek Trail, as well as to the Tigard Heritage Street Trail. So we're asking the community about if we built a new bridge, which one would be a priority to connect the neighborhoods, to connect the commercial areas, or should we actually do something that's easier to do, which is to improve the Greenberg crossing that exists between these two bridges here. So that's what we're asking the community, and where we think that something along these lines might help to improve the connectivity in this area, to overcome the Highway 217 barrier, and to help people gain access to the Fano Creek corridor, which is hugely desirable. We also are asking folks about, do they want better crossings of Hall Boulevard to get to the parks that are on the other side of Hall Boulevard, or is it more important them to focus on Greenberg Road to get over to the mall and all the different services and stores that are on the other side of Greenberg? So those are a couple of things we're asking the community. And we're also letting them know that we've had conversations with both the mall and with TriMet, and both of those partners are very interested in providing better TriMet service through the mall property. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but right now the transit center is very much in the north, and buses pretty much like come in from the north and they kind of leave to the north, and they don't really come down to the southern part of the mall property. So they're very much on board in providing that as the mall property starts to redevelop. So those are some of the transportation projects that we're putting out to the community that we want to get feedback on. And there are some land use changes in there as well, but I'm not going to focus on those because our time is limited. But like I said, I encourage you to go to the open house, and there's more description there about the changes in the land use as well. But I want to stop there for a second and see if anybody has any questions.
I had a question.
Sure.
So these proposals, like the one that was presented 20 years ago.
Yep.
Why don't those, I mean, I know it's a plan, but why don't those get implemented? Is it budget constraint sometimes? Is it?
Yeah, sadly, I mean, budget is a huge thing. A bridge over 217, and in this case, two bridges over 217 and the railroad, which are longer bridges, are hugely expensive projects, something that Tigard could never do on its own. It would need state and federal funding probably to do something that large, and it would need buy-in from the region. And we just ultimately didn't have the buy-in. And part of the reason for that is that unlike some other areas that are fully within Tigard's jurisdiction that we could advocate for, this area is within 3 jurisdictions. And for example, Beaverton, and even us, we've been focusing on our downtown and on the Tigard Triangle. We haven't actually, since that planning effort, it feels like we haven't put a lot of effort into this area in advocating for it. And similarly, Beaverton has been focusing on their downtown and not their portion of the regional center. So it's a combination of priorities, I think kind of split jurisdiction and priorities within those respective jurisdictions. And lastly, there is some like technical feasibility issues with the bridge that was identified to go from the mall property all the way over to this currently dead-ended Nimbus Road, with the idea that Nimbus come all the way through to Greenberg. That project never even made it into Tigard's TSP 20 years ago because they determined after another hard look at the alignment that road extension would need to go through significant wetlands. It would need to get across the railroad tracks somehow, that it was just not only super expensive and that there was not necessarily be any development that would ever pay for it. So it'd have to be a city project, but that the impacts to the wetlands and the expense of doing another potential overcrossing or undercrossing of a railroad, because we weren't going to get another railroad crossing, just ended up killing the project. So for all those reasons, they haven't come into being.
And I guess a follow-up question with that is, I mean, with this proposal, I mean, are we going to be like 20 years down the road and say, why didn't this get done?
I hope not, because
I mean, it's obviously a scaled back version. Yes,
right, exactly. And we're really asking folks like, of the one thing that we could do, what do you suggest that we focus on? And in our open house, we talk about, we could, improve the Greenberg crossing, and that's a less expensive project that could happen more quickly. Or do you want to wait? because it takes a while to get funding together for any one of these, bigger projects like the bridges. Are you willing to wait for something like these bridges? And we're talking about maybe just doing one. And so, I do not want to be in the position 20 years from now where people are looking back and saying, yeah, we didn't do that either. Because one of the things that we're going to do right after we complete this kind of visioning work is and we've already started talking about implementation. We need to have a better funding strategy for whatever we end up recommending that comes out of this project. And that it did happen last time, but I was gonna say there was a funding strategy, but the funding strategy wasn't implemented. So for example, 20 years ago, they recommended urban renewal, which is, I think you're probably familiar with, it's an older term, but tax increment financing to fund a lot of these really expensive projects in this area. But then, and I could never figure out why. I tried to find in the records what happened, but urban renewal never happened here. So this area has never had a funding source, unlike our downtown, unlike Tigard Triangle, unlike even River Terrace. And so we're looking at things like geocapturing development fees that happen here. So to keep fees that are paid here by developers to keep them in the area, like we've done in River Terrace. We're looking at just different ideas that could be localized funding sources to support this area. And that we really want to get something in place. And that didn't happen last time. So that's a real big priority as an outcome of this project as well.
All right, Susan, we have a couple other questions. Alan?
So I have a question about just map orienteering. I haven't gone through the open house just yet, but are all the maps different, oriented differently? Is there a way to consistently present these so that it's true to what people are seeing on their phones for map direction? Because it makes it difficult for me to visualize where these different places are, with Hall not being true north-south, for example, on the far eastern edge of the border.
Well, actually, Hall bends like this. Actually, Hall is not true north-south, which I struggle with.
Side, certainly not as northwest as it is right there. On the previous one, it was even skewed even more. So there's just inconsistency with how these are being presented so far. And I think very consistent map information is very critical for presenting the same storytelling for anybody when you're asking them for feedback, because they have to constantly think harder.
Yeah, I totally agree. So these maps are exactly the same base maps.
Okay.
Those are exactly the same base maps.
Yep.
And it was taken from an aerial photo, obviously an oblique aerial photo, so it's not straight down. But so these are the alignments of the streets in real life. But point taken. I mean, it is constantly a challenge to figure out how to display information graphically, not just have a whole bunch of text and have people, because not all people find it easy to even looking at these kinds of images and understanding them. And so we absolutely try to do our best to make it as legible in that way as possible.
Yeah. And then my second question for just the presentation, again, I haven't gone through the open house, but are there parts of this project where you would not even have to coordinate with the various agencies, ODOT, Beaverton, just Washington County stuff for the unincorporated area? Is that presented in some of the options for how it could be cheaper, easier, faster for some options versus others?
We're actually just focusing, even though this, because the regional center is within these 3 jurisdictions, this shows, like the original vision shows the full original vision. But going back to this map, which is a straight on aerial photo, these are the areas that we're asking for people for recommendations on, and these are the areas that Tigard has planning authority over. We actually, the Metzger unincorporated area is actually within our planning service district, so we're kind of required to plan for it, even though hasn't currently annexed. It's kind of annexing gradually to Tigard, but we're leaving out what's going on in Beaverton because we don't have land use authority over there. But we can't get away from talking to ODOT or TriMet because Highway 217 and Hall Boulevard go through Tigard. So we still always have to coordinate with those folks. But we've tried to simplify things by not focusing, even trying to ask questions about the Beaverton side of the regional center.
Right. And this is the map I was thinking of when we were looking at it.
Yeah.
The orientation to the other map view.
Yeah, this one is slightly different. It's the straight-on view, and which is why we're always trying to label things. But Hall Boulevard is a weird one. Hall Boulevard does do this wonky turn. It used to be like the farm to market road way back when, before we had highways and such, and so it turns and twists all through the region. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, I do understand your comment about trying to keep things the same. We actually have 3 maps. An existing conditions map, an original vision map, and a proposed vision that all use this same orientation to help people understand kind of the high level vision. And then we have the same kind of map construction for all the sub areas. Any other questions?
Yeah, Carl has a question.
So I serve on the Metzger Park Local Improvement District in this area, and I live in this area off of Hall and Faffel. And so the most common things that I always get from people are the lack of sidewalks.
Yep.
And the lack of the ability to walk to Washington Square.
Yep.
Like if there's anywhere to walk, it's either down to Metzger Park or the shops down there, or it's Washington Square. And there just really isn't reliable walking or biking room to do that in most places. So if you were going to prioritize anything, I would not worry about the commercial district so much. Those are all big box shops. There's like the furniture store, the four-wheeler store, some corporate offices, the Harley store, and all that stuff that I don't think average people are going to be walking to go shopping at. So if you were going to pick a bridge to die on, I would go for that second bridge that focuses on pedestrian and bicyclists.
That is, love to hear your feedback on that. I have preferences, but it's great to hear yours. And I kind of need to keep my preferences out of it, but because we want to give people meaningful choices for us to hear from folks like you, like where should we focus? And I'm really pleased to hear that you say you're from that Metzger, I think, is it called the Metzger Park LID Advisory Board?
Yep.
So I'm going to be presenting to your group in 2 weeks' time. And one of the questions I have for that group is, is it ever possible to use any of the funds that are generated through that local improvement district to create better access across Hall Boulevard? Because Hall is a barrier. Yeah. We definitely, we're talking to ODOT about jurisdictional transfer, as you might have heard from Dave. But right now, there are no pedestrian crossings all around that bend, and it's just these folks are paying for it, and it's really difficult for them to get there on foot.
You will probably hear an earful from a woman by the name of Chrissy Rowan at that meeting about that.
Okay. In a good way, or
I think in a good way. She's open to finding ways to get safe crossings for kids to Metzger Park.
Great. So that's what we want to see too, and that's one of the things we're asking folks again in terms of priorities. Do people want to get across Greenberg? Like get to the mall and services? Do they want to get across Hall? Because there's going to be a new park over here. It doesn't really have an official name yet, but this park and this park over here are going to be under construction in about 2 years. So these parks are happening. So we've got all these barriers, to get to those parks though. So we're really keen on creating better access to the parks and trails for sure. Any other questions before I move on? Okay, I'm going to move on. So this is a different map. So this is the orientation of all the sub-area maps. So this is just a straight-on aerial photo. And this is kind of embedded in the part of our open house that's focusing on transportation. And it shows the existing crossings over 217, and those are the orange arrows. It shows the potential future crossings over 217, and those are the dashed orange arrows, and they're further down here. So those were those yellow and orange bridges on the previous map. And then this one actually shows, because it's a little closer up view, where the future Bagan Park is going to be, which is in the Ash Creek corridor, and where the future Steve Street Park, although that's not going to be its official name. Of course, Metzger Park is up here. It shows these trailheads. This one is for the Tigard Street Heritage Trail, and that goes into downtown. And then Fano Creek Trail, it goes both north and south. And then lastly, and this map has a legend, which I didn't include on this slide, but in real life it has a legend. We just circled this area because we wanted to call out to folks that, and maybe you've heard about this from Dave, but that the city was awarded a grant from ODOT to put sidewalks on the north side of Locust Street from Hall Boulevard all the way to the school, as well as a crossing. So that is a project that will be happening because it was definitely needed, and clearly it was competitive. So these are, again, the kind of the transportation related things that we're asking people about. Where do you want to see those connections? And there's a series of questions about, improvements to Greenberg Road, improvements to Hall, like where are the priorities for the community? And then just in general, how we kind of describe what we're proposing is that we are talking about maintaining the original vision for the Washington Square Mall sub-area. And that's where, based on market analysis, based on conversations with the mall, based on what they've actually already gotten approval for, and I'll show you an image of that in a second, we think the mall property, given that it's under single ownership, there's large surface parking lots that can be redeveloped based on where they need to go to remain competitive. They need to kind of become more outward facing. They need to be more walkable and more interesting for pedestrians, frankly. Like kind of these old internal malls are becoming, not as competitive as these other kinds of developments that are much more walkable. So they're already starting to pivot in that direction, and perhaps even bring housing to that area. And so that's where we really can see kind of a dense, more urban, transit-oriented development in this area. We don't expect that everywhere. And I think the original vision kind of it over aspired and was expecting, really tall, dense buildings everywhere, and we just don't see that happening. So we're kind of right-sizing the original vision for the other areas and bringing it down into kind of a much more realistic kind of frame. And then we want to refine the original transportation vision in the way that I've talked about, because we do want to do things where we can, achieve them in the near future, in the next 20 years. So that's how we're summarizing our proposal. And just to kind of show you kind of where the mall area might be moving, in case you're not aware of this, because, this is super interesting and exciting to some. But I wish I could say raise of hands, but I can't see you guys. I'm not sure if you're aware of the Sears redevelopment project that the mall already got approval for like a year and a half ago, and would have been under construction but for COVID. But just to kind of orient you, this is the mall property. This is, if you're familiar with the Crescent Grove Cemetery. And then this white topped building is the old Sears building that, as you probably know, is vacant. Sears went bankrupt. And then, this is just surface parking lot. And so the mall, again, in trying to remain competitive, they're already making these moves where this is the proposal that they got approved about a year and a half ago. And this includes much denser, taller development, a much more like building out the grid here for pedestrians and bikes, building in some pedestrian areas like a plaza and a little park green area, and actually adding housing as well over commercial. So a very different kind of development than the mall, is currently. So I'm going to show you kind of a rendering of, again, this is what they have gotten approval for. And in talking with them, they expect to be under construction next year. So, instead of your typical suburban 1- and 2-story buildings, that is the mall, and that's what's off in the distance here. This is a rendering that shows basically this area down here, if you were standing right here and looking north. So it's showing the kind of development that is going to be happening here in the next little while. So you're looking at housing over commercial, you're looking at a hotel over here, multiple stories, you're looking at a nice plaza, walkable area. So it's a very different kind of feel. And then this is an exercise that we went through with them, and this is why we also feel like this is the place where it's going to happen, but it's not going to happen everywhere. So this is also different images of the mall property. And so on the right-hand side, I'll just walk you through what you're seeing here. This was just a thought exercise we did with TriMet and with the mall that really got them thinking, and is quite shocking in some ways, and because we don't expect this to happen precisely, but it just helps you to see how much room is here on the mall property in existing surface parking lots. So on the left-hand side is, kind of the bulk of the mall buildings. And then this circle over here, which is at the exact same scale as the mall building, is actually about, 16 blocks or so of the Pearl District. So we don't expect to see the Pearl District, here, but this just gives you a sense of the kind of development that can happen here. And this is the direction that the mall is going to be going over the next 10 years or so. And because of where the transit center is currently located, which is right about here, and on this image, it's kind of where the TC is X'd out. So there's a very centralized transit center located here, which, pre-COVID, about 15,000 people went through that transit center every week. So this is like just a huge opportunity for more transit-oriented development, and which is definitely, more walkable and pedestrian-oriented. So bringing a very different kind of development to this area that hopefully, can help address our climate challenges and our housing challenges. And that the other idea that we talked to the mall and TriMet about, again, is this kind of a very cartoony version, just to show how instead of having a centralized transit center, that doesn't serve this area down here very well, and that's where that new Sears redevelopment is happening, is that they're all very interested, once the mall starts redeveloping in this way, of bringing transit all the way through the mall site, where there's going to be a lot more development. And so, the idea is that this would be very transit-oriented development. So that's kind of a potential future. And have to I stop
Susan, I
there
think
and
we
ask for questions?
Oh, yeah.
Michael,
Yeah, we have one question from Alan. Yeah.
Alan?
Alan, I can go first if you want.
My question actually had answered by the next slide, so I lowered my hand.
Okay, I guess my question is with the redevelopment that's going on in the Sears property.
Yep.
Why, when things are planned that way, is housing put next to a major highway? I mean, that sounds really undesirable in my opinion.
It's not what we actually like. The city didn't say, hey, you must put housing here. This whole area is actually zoned as mixed use commercial. And you're not the first person to make that comment about putting housing right next to Highway 217. And actually somebody even just assumed, oh, well, this is going to be workforce housing, and how horrible of the mall to put, the lower income families and workers right up against the freeway. When in fact, actually, the mall, in all of their own, kind of market research, and working with, other developers that focus on multifamily development in this kind of context, they actually would be marketing this, building this as kind of more luxury housing. The city would prefer that they maybe provide some housing for their workforce, which tends to be, retail jobs tend to be lower paying, which unfortunately they were not interested in, and that's not something that we can require of them. But this was the mall's proposal, not the city's, and they think, it's kind of like their dime. They think this is marketable and feasible. And, you do see, in definitely more urban environments, these kinds of developments. I mean, if you just take 405 through downtown Portland, you do see this. It's not necessarily where maybe you would want to live, but some people are totally okay with that. And that's what they're going for based on all the analysis they've done.
And I guess another comment too is it doesn't seem all that walkable in that area. I mean, and maybe what Tigard is planning to do might address that, but.
Yeah, we're trying to, I mean, we were, they got this approved under our existing code, which, it's always challenging with code and with what cities can exact versus what developers are willing to, funders are willing to fund and developers are willing to build. Is this exactly what the city of Tigard would like to see? No. Is it a compromise, where we actually got better street improvements and better PED connections than, what they would have done on their own? Absolutely. Like, we were able to push them. And I know this was not necessarily, an overview of the Sears redevelopment, but it does extend a street and it puts sidewalks and bike lanes on all these streets through here. And it actually brings, a spine up through this direction as well as out to here. So it's starting to create more of a grid than currently what exists, which is just a ginormous parking lot over here. Would we like it to be a much finer grain grid? We would. But this is what we were able to get with the standards that we have in place. Any other questions?
Okay. Interesting.
So next steps, just again to let you know, we're got this online open house that's going on right now. Really hope that you guys visit it and share it with anybody else that might be interested. And then once we actually collect the feedback from the open house, we're also doing some focus group with some specific community members that we often don't hear from. We're doing a Spanish-speaking focus group. We're also doing the hockey community is an African immigrant community organization that actually has a lot of people living in this area. So we're going to do a focus group specifically with them. But we're going to take all that feedback and we're going to, basically take our draft recommendations, look at it through the lens of the feedback we got, and then come up with our final project recommendations. So that's kind of right in here. We're going to produce our final report. And then we're going to be taking that through to our Planning Commission and City Council, and actually all throughout this project, but certainly as we begin to make very specific recommendations, especially about transportation, we're going to be coordinating that with the project that Dave has going on right now, which is the TSP update. And Dave and I have been coordinating our projects all along. In fact, I don't know if this is okay to say, Dave, but that PED bike bridge at 95th Avenue over Highway 217, that was Dave's idea. So he sees something there in terms of how we can overcome that barrier and create some connectivity to the north-south as well as over the Fano Creek Trail. So he and I have been in a lot of contact over the past many months about our two projects. And that is it for me. Do you have any final questions for me?
It's great information, and I'm sure that members of the committee will be looking at the open house and sharing their opinions.
That would be great, and please share it as well with anybody else who might be interested.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let me unshare my screen. Actually, I have to get out of this, do a number of steps. There we go.
Well, I know Carl is needing to leave the meeting shortly, so why don't we go through with the minutes? I don't know that we have a quorum to actually approve them, but I want to be sure that everyone hasn't had an opportunity to read them. And if there's any comments or questions about the minutes from the March 3rd meeting. Why don't I? Looks like we have 1, 2, 3. Dave, do you know? I think we've only got 5 voting members currently, and we need 6.
So we're not quite there then, yeah.
Yeah. Do you want me to do a roll call?
Actually, it looks like George might have just joined us. Let's see. Is that you, George, on the phone? Somebody on the phone joined us. Let's see. I can count really quick here. Alan, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I'm only seeing. No, we have 6 voting members on right now.
Okay, well, let's go ahead then. I'm not hearing any questions or concerns with the current minutes, so those that are in favor, as I call your name, if you are in favor or not, you can do your voting. So,
Ruth, just to be official, I'm going to create a motion that we approve the minutes.
thank you.
I will second the motion.
So Alan and Lindsay. Thank you. So we will vote on the motion. So Alan?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Lonnie? He's here. Lindsay?
Yes.
George? We're voting on the minutes, George.
Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties over here. I haven't heard anything, and I didn't get a copy of the minutes, so I'll have to abstain.
Thank you. So we have 1, 2, and I vote yes. So we have 5 at this point. So we'll have to review them again next month in order to be able to, I guess the motion fails at this point in time due to not having a quorum.
And Ruth, I've got to log off now.
All right. Thank you, Carl. I appreciate you joining us. Okay. The next agenda item is the Tigard on the Move equity panel. And Richard and I have been working with Dave on that. And we also received some valuable input today, both from Carl and Karen. And so we were just going to kind of give you the committee a summary of our activities. The Transportation Equity series is scheduled for June at this point, and we have developed a description of what we're looking at. It's kind of an opportunity to introduce the whole subject around transportation equity. The description, I think I'll go through and just read this piece of it, and then we can have some discussion. The transportation systems impact the health, economy, and environment of our communities. These impacts do not affect the lives of all people equally. The benefits and costs associated with planning, design, construction, and operation of our transportation infrastructure are distributed unequally across different populations. Through implementation of its strategic plan and complete streets policy, the City of Tigard is striving to achieve equity and mobility by developing a transportation system that provides a range of travel options, reduces negative social and environmental outcomes, and enhances economic opportunity in marginalized and underserved neighborhoods. So that's kind of our description that we'll be using. And then we're interested in having presenters share their experiences in 3 specific areas. The first one, we're looking at speakers who can address health and climate. The other is active transportation and safety. And the third area is equality and gentrification. So the idea is that we'll have a moderated panel, probably 3 speakers to kind of focus on those areas. And then we're working to develop questions that will be used to kind of direct the presentation. So Dave and Richard, anything, what else would, please share your thoughts?
I can step in really quickly and just you mentioned at the beginning, Ruth, but the idea here is to bring back our Tigard on the Move speaker series, which is something that we were doing right before COVID hit, and so that'll be the format of the panel, and we'll use a lot of the same collateral material that we developed for the Tigard on the Move series. So we have some pretty good graphic design and outreach materials that we'll use, and this would be, again, similar to the last events that we held, open to the public but hosted by TTAC. And I think the idea here is that we'd pick somebody from TTAC to moderate the panel. I think, but we can talk more about that. And
yeah, we haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah, we haven't gone that far yet. But I think the description you provided is great, Ruth. And yeah, I guess we're seeking feedback and maybe like a thumbs up to keep moving forward on this.
I think the other piece too, we're kind of seeing it as an introduction to the whole area. And so having specifically, you know, what is Tigard doing? Who's, you know, from Tigard is doing what is kind of the next step maybe for what we're looking at. So the presentation is really to open up the topic and try to cover why it's so important. And then, you know, we may have another speaker, you know, series or another presentation on the next steps, or we may just invite people to come to TTAC with what is going on in Tigard and to share directly with us as a committee. Richard, anything else you'd like to share?
Let me click all my buttons off here. Not at this point. I think you did a really good job of summarizing it, Ruth. So thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I think there's a whole nother level detail that we'll get to by next month, and I think it might be helpful if we, you know, the three of us meet again, and then we can send out something to the group for them to actually have in front of them, a hard copy or an email, kind of talking about it and get comments.
To reply to us.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask or thoughts at this point in time? Okay, well, Dave, I guess we'll just keep working on it.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
All right, our next presentation, our presenter is Hendrik. If you'd like to go ahead and share your information on the Safe Routes to School program.
Great. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Hendrik. I am the newer Safe Routes to School coordinator. I started in, well, I guess December, at the end of December of last year, but really starting January of this year. And before I jump into the Safe Routes to School program with an overview and current initiatives, I'll just share a little bit about me so you have some background info. Before taking this position, I was working with a large active travel company called Backroads for the last 7 years. Half the year I was guiding biking and hiking trips in the US and in Europe, and the other half the year I was doing our hiring and training and staff development for the company. Prior to that, I worked for an energy consulting firm in Portland, downtown Portland, called Cadmus for 4 years. I did an AmeriCorps year up in Vancouver, Washington for a year. And before that, I was in Southern California, where I went to school for biology at UCLA. So there's a little snapshot about me. And with that, I will launch into the Safe Routes to School presentation, unless anyone has any pressing questions for me before I start. Great. Then I will pull up my PowerPoint presentation and would appreciate if I could get a verbal confirmation once people can see it.
I can see it.
Wonderful. Thank you
I
so
can see
much.
it.
So the Safe Routes to School program, it's continuing. It's been around for a while, and I am the next person in line to take the baton and run forward with it. I think it would be useful to give a little bit of an overview of the Safe Routes to School program, just to remind folks about what that's about, and then jump into some more specifics about what's happening now and hopefully in the near future. So the Safe Routes to School program is really a initiative to get kids and the greater community to walk, bicycle, and take public transportation like school buses to get to and from school and other trips. My primary role is to work with the Tigard Tualatin School District to start initiatives and encouragement activities. But the idea is that it also has a general positive effect on the community as a whole. And I think this fits really well with developments and larger planning processes like Susan was talking about, because our society seems to be moving back towards more active transportation, which it moved away from for years. And it's really exciting to be part of that. And so I'm working under Dave Roth primarily in this capacity. The Safe Routes to School program it's like 5 or 6 E's that it likes to highlight as its major tasks. And so I'll just briefly touch on each of those and what they mean very generally. One is education. So that's teaching kids how to be safe and smart and healthy while they're getting out and either walking, biking, scootering, skateboarding out where there's also vehicles, and safety is a priority within that. So education delves a little deeper when we talk about what that looks like, but right now it looks like pedestrian and scooter education for kids around the 2nd grade and bicycle safety education for kids in 5th or 6th grade. So primarily elementary schools, but also potentially middle schools. The second E would be encouragement. And I think that's where I get to have a lot of fun with this job, and that's to get people excited about getting outside. And encouragement events could look like walking and rolling to school days, art contests, and really a variety of different things. As you can imagine, with the last year, it's been an interesting time to step in this position and see what opportunities are out there. But there are a couple exciting things coming up that I'll talk about in a moment. Enforcement is specifically about crossing guards, and Washington County just sort of finalized their crossing guard training recently, and that's something we're going to try to get out to all schools so that the volunteers that are helping with crossing know some more details about how to do that effectively. Engineering is a piece that I've been spending some time on recently, because with the pandemic, I'm not out doing a lot of events, but instead I've been able to do a lot of desk work and focus on finding safe routes to school specific infrastructure potential. So looking where we could find more crosswalks, sidewalk infill, bike lanes, and sort of a whole variety of different things that we can incorporate into the city's planning process. Finally, evaluation is always important to collect info, track participation, and really see what change looks like, not just in the things that I will be doing, but what my predecessors have done. And maybe, one day someone else will take the baton from me, but it's really great to see a change and trends. And that's what we're hoping to do with evaluation. Some of the exciting things right now, our current initiatives are, I mentioned the infrastructure list. I've worked with Dave and Tegan in our engineering department to start looking at projects that are school specific or near schools or are on pathways to schools, that we can find opportunities to make it easier and safer for kids to travel actively to school. It seems, a little odd sometimes to try to encourage people that you should be walking or biking to school, and then on the major access points, there's missing sidewalks or no good crosswalks. And now it feels, then you're stuck in a situation where safety is inhibiting the progress of encouragement. So really finding what infrastructure improvements we can do. And we've put together a list of about 55 projects in Tigard that could be considered for ped bike funding, so smaller projects, or maybe to be included in the CIP in the future. So we're working on that currently, and that's really exciting. A second initiative is a big move for May Challenge, and that is going to be a month-long challenge starting very soon, and we're getting up to speed there. But it's a Safe Routes to School effort and a Tigard Parks and Rec effort. We're working together to promote primarily through TTSD, but also through other avenues, because we're opening, this isn't just a school specific challenge, this is for all youth in Tigard and Tualatin. So the challenge is open to all, and it's also pretty broad. We still are dealing with safety protocols and a lot of challenging pieces of families are really busy. It's hard to organize events. A lot of people have too many things on their plates to follow rigid guidelines. So essentially the challenge is we're providing a list of really fun activities like activity bingo, neighborhood scavenger hunts, a rolling scavenger hunt, a list of the Tigard city events that are happening in the month of May. And we're basically asking and challenging kids to go out, even if it's going outside for a bike ride or doing some jumping jacks at home or doing any of these challenges. If you do anything at all, you can fill out a survey each week through our Engage Tigard site, and that counts as your raffle ticket. And then at the end of the month, we're going to have some really cool prizes, including scooters. The Tualatin River Keepers will have a family package day event. We're thinking about Sky Cart, having some tickets for a family to go out and enjoy those Sky Carts, and a couple of different things, but trying to focus on local or very fun prizes to get kids engaged, activated, and outside or indoors just being active, because I think there's a lot of studies that show over the time of the pandemic, without structured extracurricular activities, activity levels have gone down. So this is us trying to jumpstart that again before the summer kicks up. And on that note, we have plans to do an education at Metzger Elementary School, and we're going to do rolling and strolling for all of their second grade classes and bike education for all of their fifth grade classes. So that'll be about 60 second graders and 70 fifth graders. And most of those lessons are going to be taught in the classroom, but for the second graders, they'll have 2 days outdoors with our scooter fleet, which I'll be helping with teachers to have real life scenarios out in their blacktops on how to be safe pedestrians and scooters. And then with the bicycle safety education, there's actually going to be 6 sessions outdoors. So that's 6 whole hours of learning how to bike safely. And then we're going to actually bike around the neighborhoods to get some real life practice to really prepare these kids to get out, be safe, and have fun out there. And then finally, I'll just mention the Streets for People effort. Well, we'll jump into a whole presentation about that, so I'll leave that alone for the moment. Before I jump into the future goals, does anyone have any questions about the current initiatives? Great.
Richard has a question.
Yeah, is there any plan to roll out the bike and scooter training to other schools besides Metzger?
Great question, thank you. For this year, no. I've talked with almost every principal at TTSD and asked what they're comfortable with and what they have capacity for. And most schools' immediate response was, wait, don't really bother us with too much until next year. So Metzger was the one school that reached out to me before I even could ask them, and they said, hey, we want this. And they've been very proactive. So it was pretty easy to get that moving with them, whereas other schools weren't all that gung-ho about it, at least for the time being. And then to talk about the future a little bit, I think this program hasn't had a ton of traction at a lot of the elementary schools in the area. And part of that is probably because if a school hasn't done this kind of education before, like bicycle safety education, which on the slide you can see at Metzger, we're going to do 10 sessions, each an hour long. So that's 10 hours of bicycle training. It's kind of a big ask. Not necessarily a big ask, but a school might be a little hesitant to commit to something like that. So one plan I'd like to do is to really get the rolling and strolling education for second graders into, the goal would be every elementary school next year. And that's a 5 lesson training, which is 5 hours that's spread out over 5 days, which to me seems like something that could be a little easier for a school to incorporate, and then building on that relationship and that experience and hopefully a success with each school is to also try to get this bicycle safety education into each school as well. But I see that as a sort of a long-term arc to get there, but definitely it is the goal. If we could have both of these education pieces at every elementary school, that would be a huge win, and that is the ultimate goal.
Thanks.
Hey, Alan, you have a question?
Yeah, so obviously year-over-year metrics are nothing you can really use this year. But how would you like to see metrics shift? I know this is partly into the goals, but how would you like to see metrics be used for like your current initiatives, and how would you like to see them shift as you go, like transition into future goals?
Yes, I love that question. And I'll start by saying I don't have a great answer for you, because I don't have a great answer for me yet. But that is, I think, it's such an important component to incorporate in planning early on, so that you have a good plan to continue that in the future. And that's very much on my to-do list, to come up with a good strategy to have that. But I don't have that strategy formulated yet. It's kind of, I'm still, this is I'm going into my 4th month on the job, and a lot of that's been learning and doing interviews within the city and in the school district and nonprofit representatives and stakeholders. So a lot of that time has been me being a sponge and learning and figuring out what my job looks like. And this is a piece that I still haven't concreted yet, but I appreciate you asking about that, because it is very important. One other piece I'll add before I move on from the slide, with our Move for May challenge, we've been working with TTSD, the Basic Needs Committee, the Pact with Pride group, with other representatives, to make sure that equity is a big piece of this challenge. So what originally started as an online, survey and do challenges online, has now also incorporated paper surveys that can be picked up and dropped off at Fano Creek. We're translating as much as we can into 5 to 6 different languages, including Spanish, Vietnamese, Arabic, Russian, Chuckese are the languages we're working on right now. And we're really trying to make sure that every student or every youth in the 2 cities have a chance to take part in this and be entered into raffles. And that's a big push. And that's been really great. That's been something we've kind of been running through over the last 2 weeks to make sure that we're not missing any important links there. So moving towards fall of 2021, there's a couple of big pieces that I would like to work on. And I'll start with bus transportation is also part of this position. It's getting the ultimate goal of the Safe Routes to School program is to limit, reduce, and end single family car drives to schools. I mean, that creates congestion. It creates, it limits kids being active. It affects air quality. So if we can get rid of the single families driving their single or couple of kids to school, then that's a big win for everybody. And so ideally that's through active transportation, but a lot of kids don't live close enough to some schools to be able to bike or walk to school. So the best next option is getting on the bus. Currently, the TTSD bus information is there, and it's accessible. And if you do a little bit of work, you can figure out the best bus station for your kid, where they can get on and get off, and what the times are. But there are better systems out there. I've been looking at different schools, including the Beaverton School District, where they have a more a place where you can get information that's updated weekly, and families can figure out exactly where the intersection is from their home. So it's a little easier to understand, and I'm hoping to work with Jeff Smoke and TTSD, who are very into and interested in this idea as well, to make bus information, the school bus information, easier to use and understand and access. That, I think, would be a really big win if we can incorporate that by the beginning of next school year. Alongside that is, so as a dual pronged approach, is having really good maps for school, for kids to, for each school ideally. That's kind of a lofty goal, that show the best ways where kids can bike and walk or actively travel to school. So avoiding high traffic roads, keeping kids on roads with complete sidewalks and good crosswalks. So if we have both of those pieces, I think that would be a huge win for fall of this next year. I already touched on this education piece. I would love to get the rolling and strolling pedestrian education into all second grade classes starting next year. I think it's doable. Let's see what happens, but that's a big goal. And then get the bike education in as we can. And for me, a big learning experience will be to see how this Metzger education goes, because I think that'll be a great way for me to learn what works and what doesn't work. And then maybe even to get Metzger as a promoter through other schools. If they love it and it goes really well, how do we use that experience to show other schools, like, hey, Metzger did it, they love it, here's what they have to say about it. Let's talk about getting this into your school as well. And that segues into, the relationship aspect. I'm still relatively new to the position. I think Safe Routes to School benefits a lot when all the other stakeholders are confident in the program, the people implementing it and supporting it, and see results. And that is something that I think is earned, and I'm hoping to do just that over the next few months, and using positive communication with all principals, the head of the school district, and my next big piece of communication outreach will be to start introducing myself to the PTA groups of each school. And then for the future, so a little further out, we've talked a little bit about wayfinding signs in the city of Tigard, and that's about as far as the conversation's gone so far, but I think that's a great goal that's somewhat lofty, but not impossible to do in the next couple of years. So wayfinding, not just for schools, but for all of Tigard, but also incorporating school-specific routes on those signs. We've done bike rodeos in the past, maybe 1 or 2 a year typically. I'd like to look a little bit into having bike rodeos, or maybe even smaller scale pop-ups in locations that are more accessible or easily accessible to underserved neighborhoods. Would love to see if we can get into some apartment complex parking lots. So that is something I'd like to look into and see what opportunities there are. And traffic playgrounds are a really effective tool where kids can go and safely learn how to stay in lanes, stop at these mock intersections that are not on streets, they're in parks or parking or blacktops of schools. So that's something that Tina was really excited about and had done some groundwork on, and I'd like to continue that effort and see where we can go with it. And with that, we're done with the Safe Routes to School portion of this presentation. Any questions or thoughts?
I have a question. This is Ruth. The Safe Routes to School maps, I know they've been developed over the years. Are you just needing to review them, or are they really needing to be redone?
I think some are great and probably don't need too much input. I don't believe there are maps for every single school, including the high schools and middle schools.
I know there probably aren't. Yeah, they would have been mostly for the elementary school.
So
Okay.
I would just like to expand it a little bit, and then I'm still learning, and I've done a big day of biking around parts of Tigard, but I still want to bike around and explore a little more so I can have a little better firsthand knowledge about how, the strengths of those maps and any areas of improvement.
Great. Thank you. That answers my question. Does anyone else have questions about this presentation? Okay, well, let's move on to Streets for People.
I'm sorry, waiting for Richard to see his hand up here.
I'm sorry, Richard.
Sorry, I forgot to put it down.
Oh.
Alan, did you have a question?
Yeah, so something just came to mind when you talked about going to apartments, and I think one of the sites you see at apartments commonly are bikes hanging over their balconies or up on balconies, and typically more stuff, which can be actually a violation, and they could be cited for it. So I think that something like safe storage of bicycles, and maybe even working with apartment complexes for safe storage with bicycles would be an important point to at least bring that aspect out of it, so they're not potentially getting cited for that.
Great. That is that's super useful. Thank you. All right, then I think we're ready to transition to the Streets for People presentation. I did switch presentations, so if someone could confirm that you are seeing Streets for People, that would be great.
We can see it.
Yep. I'm seeing both your slides and your next slide.
Yeah.
It's fine if that's how it works.
That's going to be how it works, because
Okay.
my desktop likes this more so than anything else.
That's great. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So Streets for People, you've seen this before. There was a pilot study last year that Dave took the lead on, and it got really great feedback, and we're hoping to do it again, and or planning to do it again starting the end of this month. The last Friday of April, we'd like to start putting up the Streets for People signs, and the program will be very similar to last year. There was one pilot location, and we're going to use that same location and then add 2 more, and we'll look at those maps in a little bit. But the original goal of the Tigard Streets for People was to support the strategic vision of Tigard and to improve access to trails. And that pilot study did just that and was very effective in doing that. This year, with the additional 2 locations, we are emphasizing or really looking at having that contribute to safe routes to school, while also taking into account active transportation equity. So those 2 pieces were also true of the original pilot study. So really, Dave chose probably the best location to start this study, or this effort last year. And these other 2 locations are focusing on one, the other, or both of these. And this started last year because of COVID-19. It was to create space and pedestrian-friendly streets where people could socially distance and have cars understand that those were pedestrian-heavy areas. That's also true of this year, that this is very much still in line with COVID-19 health protocols. So the guiding principles this year are safe spaces for residents and K through 12 students to recreate and travel. We want to make sure that underserved or marginalized neighborhoods are prioritized, and still, of course, connecting neighborhoods with Tigard's trail system. This is just a quick mention of places or of cities that are doing this as well, where it's been effective. And so Bend and Portland and Seattle are all places where they have the same program or very similar programs that have also been successful. So that just lets you all know that we're not the only ones out there doing this. So what this looks like is having a traffic barrel, 2 A-frames with 2 different signs on it that are set up temporarily. So for this upcoming effort, it'll be, I believe it's April 29th or 30th, whichever one is a Friday, through the end of October. So these structures are really there for, end of spring and the summer months, but then will go away again. And we want to make sure we communicate that so that we don't cause, other neighborhoods and other citizens to start asking, why can't they have these things on their streets, because they've been asking for this kind of thing. So these are temporary COVID-19 time structures that are meant to create safe spaces for people to socially distance and enjoy being pedestrians outdoors. So we're going to do 3 locations this year. And why don't let's take a look at the transportation equity needs analysis. So we have a great map that we'll look at in a moment that took 8 different variables, which you can see outlined here. And with each of these variables figured out which sections of Tigard had the greatest need. And I think it's best to just look at this map really quick, where you can see the darker that the color gets is where there's more of an equity need. And we'll come back to that map in a moment. And the other main thing here is safe routes to school. We want to make sure that these 3 locations are also promoting the engagement, encouragement, and engineering pieces of the Safe Routes to School program. And 3 schools are going to directly benefit from this, including Metzger Elementary, CF Tigard Elementary, and Fowler Middle School, as well as St. Anthony's, because it's all in that same area. Here are the 3 locations. The first one is Grant and Johnson and 106th. And this was the original pilot location. And we're going to do essentially the exact same thing as we did last year, because that seemed to work very well. One of the new locations is 95th Avenue corridor. And this is connecting the Metzger area, the neighborhood just south of Metzger, and then that heads down towards Main Street. And so that hits where the railroad crossing is, and there's not a great place to cross over. So it provides a clear shot down to where people can get on Main to go over the railroad tracks and then get on the Tigard Heritage Trail. So it's working with what we have to create good passageway to our trail system. And then finally, Fern Street, that is a neighborhood where there's a trailhead that where the Ascension Trail starts, and it's bordering on this line. We can just go straight to the equity map down here that is in between different levels of equity need, but it's right on the line there, so we do think it's checking that box as well. So visually, here's that first location, Grant and Johnson, and then here's Fowler Middle School, CF Tigard, here's Anthony's, and then Metzger is up here. So this Grant and Johnson really does connect the Fano Creek Trail and creates really great passageway for pedestrians between schools and surrounding neighborhoods. 95th Avenue also connects to Grant and Johnson by going to Main Street and then getting on the Tigard Heritage Trail, and creates this throughway. And in Susan's presentation, these were areas where those pedestrian bridges were being looked at. So it'll be an interesting to get feedback on 95th Avenue to see what residents thought of having a more pedestrian friendly throughway in their neighborhoods. And I'll stop here for a second to see if Dave wants to throw in any comments or thoughts that I'm missing, because this visual is really great for that.
Thanks, Hendrik. I think I'll mention it quickly that this effort is fairly resource intensive. And so I figured we might get some questions as to why we weren't doing more of these. And it's both on the financial resources side and then also staff resources. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later because we're going to be asking for some volunteer help here. But I think, Hendrik, were you going to mention the grant that we got to support this effort?
I sure can.
I think it's worth sharing that we did need to find some funding to support the purchase of the materials to put on the streets, and so Hendrik applied for a grant, and maybe you can just share a little bit of information about that because that's going to be supporting the 3 areas that we are doing this year.
Yeah, we applied for an RTO sponsorship grant, and $3,000 was awarded for this Streets for People effort. And, in the application was highlighting that really 2 locations were going to be specific to schools or to improving access to schools. And we're checking those boxes with the Grant and Johnson and 95th Avenue corridors. So that will cover, I think, a lot of the extra needs that we'll need this year to have 3 locations. It'll cover a good chunk of the material costs. And then as Dave mentioned, it doesn't cover as much as the maintenance or, the regular upkeep of these locations. So we'll at the end talk a little bit about volunteer opportunities.
And yeah, any questions about the locations or the program generally from the group? Okay.
Great. I'll continue on, but if anyone does have a question, don't hesitate to speak up and fire away. So here's the Grant Johnson 106th location. What you see here is these yellow boxes are where we'll have the stations, and we'll show you an image of what a station will look like in a little bit. And then the green line is really the area that the corridors that we're trying to promote as areas where cars know there will be pedestrians. And we're not really trying to say, hey, cars, don't drive here. We're saying, hey, cars, we're telling people these are great places to bike, walk, and connecting Fano Creek Trail. There is no other connection with Fano Creek Trail here. So people have to be on the street. They're going to be on the street anyways. So we feel like we're doing a pretty good service to let people know this area is pedestrian heavy. The second location, 95th, which goes from just south of Shady Lane, so starting after this curve, and then down to Commercial. Again, you see the yellow stations, and these are all going to be letting cars know these are going to be pedestrian heavy streets. Just be aware of that and drive safely and follow the speed limit. And here's Fern Street. We just have 3 locations, and it's this one stretch of road. This middle station is right where the trailhead is. So it's just calling attention that is a place that cars are kind of parking or pedestrians are going to be going in and out of. So any questions on any of those 3 locations? Great. Then this is a great opportunity for, before we ask about that, we'll just show you a visual of what it will look like. These are the exact kind of stations. We won't have local access only signs. We'll have the diamond-shaped yellow sign that shows a pedestrian and a bicycle on it. So it's really to grab attention for people, but working with our engineers and making sure we're using correct signage and the correct messaging, we felt that was a more appropriate sign to use versus something like a local access sign. And what we would love to do tonight is throw out a little plug. Those 3 locations, we'll work Dave and I will work with our crew to get all of those set up out there, and then of course broken down at the end of October. But a big part of these signs is making sure they stay where they're supposed to be. If when things disappear, which they almost inevitably will do, is we need to be informed of when things go missing or need replacement or are broken. And it's not an easy task for the city staff, who are pretty busy. So we're hoping that maybe someone at TTAC or maybe people that you might know could be interested in being volunteers to check on these signs.
Or have him call in on the number. There's a call-in line number only where you can call in and just talk on this phone. That would work too.
Yeah, that's fair.
Not sure if that message was for me.
I think we're getting a little
cross
audio there. Hendrik, can I just step in really quick here?
Yeah,
I
please.
think I did see Lindsay had a question, and let's let Lindsay ask her question really quick.
Thanks. Apologize in advance if you covered this before. I had a couple family interruptions during this meeting. But I was curious about the Fern Street location. How does that area overlap with the equity map that we had, showing, areas of the city that were more in need of transit equity? Okay, so it's on the edge of a high need one.
That's right. Yeah, and Lindsay, that's a great question. And I'll just say that was really the driver for us including this one. We've had obviously quite a bit of resident interest in Fern Street over the last couple months, and because of the trail access and the fact that this is on the border of a high equity needs area, that's why we included it.
Okay.
Yeah,
glad to see that. Thank you.
And then if we could just go back to the volunteer point. So essentially what we're seeking is we would like to get 3 TTAC volunteers, and it has to be TTAC members because you're already volunteers with the city. And the idea here is that you'd basically be volunteering to monitor these sites during the season. So that means, if there's one of these sites that's in your neighborhood, that would be fairly easy for you to go by and check on once or twice a week. And let us know if anything needs to be picked up or moved or replaced. That's what we would be seeking. So we're hoping to get 3 volunteers tonight. And if not tonight, you can think about it and get back to us.
I mean, I could do parts of the downtown Johnson area there.
Is that Alan?
Yeah. I just have to, can you pull that map up again too, please?
Hendrik, can you go back to the, there we go.
Yeah, this is just a long segment, but certainly the eastern portions of it would be pretty easy for me to get to and review.
Yeah, we could probably, given that one has several locations spread out, we might be able to break that one up into a couple different volunteer opportunities. And I saw Serge, you raised your hand.
I think you're on mute.
There. Okay. Sorry, I thought I'd clicked it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. I pass over that western section almost daily, so I can do the western section of that Johnson 106th.
Excellent. That'd be great. We'll follow up with those folks who can volunteer after the meeting with more detail.
Dave, do you know the people that had all the concern on Fern, whether any of them are willing to kind of help with this? Have they been approached at all?
That's a great question. We in working with our risk department on this question, we were advised that we need to stick with existing city volunteers on this one.
Okay.
So it would be best if we could get an existing city board or commission member to volunteer.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Lindsay. I can volunteer for Fern Street. I live pretty close to there.
Thanks, Lindsay. That
Yeah.
would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I could also volunteer for like the Grant Johnson area too, if that's needed, because I live very close to there.
Okay. Well, let us kind of sit down and look at the map and see how we might divide that up. So we have 3 takers for the Grant Johnson one. So anybody around the 95th area that might be interested?
I think.
I mean,
Yes.
I was going to say, I mean, I live close to both the Grant Johnson and 95th, so I live close to downtown. So either one of them's fine for me to help out.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. So I think we have pretty good coverage. We'll follow up with folks probably next week with more detail. And yeah, we really appreciate your help on this. This will help us maintain the program throughout the summer and help things roll smoothly.
To round out this presentation, we will also have our Engage site, our Tigard Engage site open where people can come and leave feedback. So there'll be an active survey there with information on the locations. We're talking about also sending out a postcard, maybe like a month after it's all set up and running to get more feedback from people. So we do want to get some information on how this is working and what people's thoughts are generally, and are hoping that it gets a positive response like Grant and Johnson did last year.
Great.
One other quick thing too, for volunteer efforts, I think it would be helpful if we had like an inventory from the beginning, so we have something to check off and set up.
Yeah, we'll have informational packets, and we're actually going to do a training with you as well. So expect to hear more from us on that.
Great. Then one last chance for any questions. Otherwise, that will be it for Streets for People.
Thank you very much, Henrik. It was very good information. It's an exciting project.
Thank you. And I appreciate all of you listening to me for the last 45 minutes or so. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move. We've got about 10 minutes. So let's move into our TTAC member items. I think I have Alan, Michael, and Serge all have things that they want to talk about. So Alan, you want to start?
Sure. And this is more of a comment directed at Dave, even though you're not the person overseeing it. But with the residence center going in there by Omara and Hall, the senior residence center and housing units, something I'm not seeing addressed with it is like neighboring streets around it. So I just want to make sure that the as part of the comments and process gets captured with it, that crossing over Omara at Hall gets some attention with the project and not just within the actual construction area. Only because people walking would need to get to the library pretty safely. And I frequently see people trying to cross over Hall at that intersection. But the Omara entrance is not a very safe one. If for pedestrians, if they're trying to get that way.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I'm quite familiar with that location, and so as you probably know, so when developments like that occur, they trigger transportation improvements based on the number of trips that they're estimated to generate. So there will be some improvements that happen because of that development, and actually I don't know what those are specifically right now, but unfortunately I'm pretty confident it's not going to trigger crossing improvements at O'Mara and Hall. It gets complicated because Hall is an ODOT roadway, and we've, based on my experience, just trying to get ODOT to do some pretty basic stuff at the Fano Creek Trail crossing on Hall. It's going to be a little bit of a heavy lift, but your comment is
crossing Hall, because the light works well for that, is crossing over O'Mara. But I know it's connecting point to it. But
when you say crossing over O'Mara, what do you mean exactly?
You're staying on the western side of Hall, and you're crossing O'Mara to get to the south side of the street there, to walk towards the light to cross over to get to the library. It's a very round corner.
Yeah.
And people can take that pretty quickly coming southbound on Hall. But then there's people taking quick lefts to get into O'Mara, and people stopping way out to the street a little bit right there too. It's already dicey enough for standard pedestrians, but you add a senior housing on top of the current senior center, and I think it's just an area that could be improved.
That's helpful, and while we're talking about this,
it might drive people to the light instead of crossing over Hall too. But
yeah, okay. I thought you were implying having a new crossing across Hall, but I get what you're suggesting here at O'Mara. So I will go back and talk to our public works team about this, because this is independent of the senior housing project, but O'Mara is on the repaving schedule for I think it's this season, and I will bring this idea to them because we're actually doing a pedestrian improvement at O'Mara and McDonald as part of the paving project, and it's this is probably worthwhile to share with TTAC so you know what's going on, but we'll be using striping changes on the roadway, as well as some delineator poles, the candlestick poles, to basically tighten up the intersection radius at O'Mara and McDonald. And there's a potential that we might be able to do something like that here as well. It does get complicated because this is an ODOT facility that it connects with, and they typically have to approve anything that we do within, a certain number of feet of their road. And it might be a little bit of a challenge working with them, but I will go back and check, see if there's something we can do. We did, on this section of O'Mara, we are making the bike lanes formal through here as part of this project. So I don't know if people are familiar with it, but on one side of the road, there's a bike lane. I guess it's the north side of the road. There's a bike lane, but on the south side of O'Mara, there's just like a 2-foot shoulder, but we're actually formalizing those both as bike lanes with the repaving project. So I'll see if there's something we can do at the intersection itself as well.
Great, thank you, Dave. And Alan, Michael, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I just had a comment. Okay. Besides what I had to share, I have a comment about O'Mara, being that I live off of O'Mara. Specifically, the sidewalks. I mean, there's an area around the senior center where there's basically no sidewalks, and if you're going to have people walking there, like seniors walking there, I mean, that's basically pretty dangerous, and especially the stop sign at O'Mara where it goes towards Edgewood. a lot of times I see people running that stop sign and there's like no shoulder whatsoever, or very little shoulder there. So, I mean, it's a big problem in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's not what I was wanting to bring up. My question was, this is in regards to the train crossing at Hall and even downtown and over by Bonita. So several times in the past couple of weeks, I've been traveling to work at around noon or so, and it blocks the intersection there. At one point in time, it was for around a half hour plus. And my question is, I know the trains have special rights, if you will, or right of way, but I'm just kind of concerned, being that there's the fire department right there, and what if there's a need on the other side? I mean, it's a significant backtrack for them if all those intersections have the arms down and you have big lines of traffic blocked. Mm-hmm. And especially at the noon hour. I mean, that's when people are generally moving around. So I don't know if there's anything that can be done. I know it's a pretty loaded question.
Short answer, no.
And I know there's a switch yard too, which complicates things too.
Yeah, and that's why they get hung up there. So yeah, unfortunately there's not really anything the local city can do about that. The trains have right of way in those
but
situations.
It's a significant corridor too for the city, and I mean, if you want to improve transportation, people do some really funny things there when the train gets backed up.
Yeah, I understand. There's not really anything we can do about it aside from doing grade separated crossings. So we just don't have any authority over the rail, the freight folks, to ask them to do something different. I wish there was, but anytime you get into rail issues with transportation projects or planning work, they always have the kind of authority over to decision-making authority. So like you're basically asking them for permission whenever you do something, regardless what that is.
Okay.
It would be interesting to hear from TVF&R what their contingency plans are for how they manage that. I imagine they probably would get out onto Highway 99 and go over the overpass with their lights and sirens on in that situation. But
yeah, sometimes that's backed up too.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But yeah, you're right. That would add to delay for emergency response.
And I guess quick thing too is, I mean, if you want people to visit downtown, if that intersection downtown is constantly being blocked, I mean, it backs up traffic all the way through downtown, and it creates just a bottleneck. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we were almost out of time. Serge, you want to get your?
Let me just hold on. Is Tegan, I would like to hear Tegan's response to my question, and she's not here anyway, so I can just wait another month. Or is Tegan there?
I don't think she joined us tonight, but feel free to email us in advance if you want some earlier feedback, Serge.
Okay.
We are out of time. I did want to share with you, and I can send it out, that the city of Tigard submitted a federal funding request for Hall Boulevard for the reauthorization bill, the federal level. So federal earmarks are back in transportation. They've been absent for the past decade or so. And we submitted a request for $4 million to improve the Fano Creek Trail crossing on Hall Boulevard, as well as to build 2 new ped and bike bridges over Fano Creek Trail on opposite sides of Hall Boulevard that would connect into the Fano Creek Trail. We initially thought we were going to be able to ask for $20 million, which was going to get us a fully improved Hall Boulevard and a jurisdictional transfer out of the deal, but our request got whittled down to $4 million. So we still think we have a great project. It's just not of the scale as what we were initially hoping for. So I thought that was worth sharing with the group.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, I think we're out of time. I appreciate everyone's participation. We have a great meeting tonight with so much information. If anybody else is interested in more information on the equity panel that we're putting together, feel free to email me. And we'll also, if you have any other information for Streets for People, to let Dave know. I think, Dave, it would be worthwhile to reach out to members who were not on the meeting tonight with just a quick note, because I know some people live close to 95th might be interested.
Yeah, thanks. We'll do that. We'll send a follow-up email with the map included. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, Dave.
Good night.
Thanks, Ruth.
Bye-bye.
Yep. Talk to you in May.